Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the A segment of episode 5 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation Turnip. We begin this segment with number 1, number 2, number 4, and number 5 battling against a giant robot bunny known as Hippie Hop in the treehouse. In the end, Hippie Hop is the one who claims victory in this battle, and it's after the battle when the audience finds out that number 3 was the one piloting the robot. This was a training exercise. The Sector V operatives then decide to take a lunch break before they resume training, and number 1 decides to go to his room for his lunch. Suddenly, turnips start appearing within the treehouse's food and beverage supplies, and the 4 present Sector V operatives notice a giant root in the middle of the street, and there are smaller roots coming from this giant root, and these smaller roots are attaching themselves to the treehouse, sort of like pipes, and this is where the turnips are coming from. The 4 present Sector V operatives then head to the central control room of the treehouse, where they meet up with number 1, who is also aware of the invasion of the turnips. And the Sector V operatives are preparing a tracking device to locate the source of the turnips. But the tracking device is signal. Yeah, the signal of the tracking device is disrupted when more turnips invade the treehouse. So the Sector V operatives have to figure out another way to find the source of the turnips. They end up going into a vehicle known as the pipe pod. And the pipe pod creates a hole in the giant root out in the street. This is because the pipe pod intends to go into the giant root and travel through it like a tunnel to reach the source of these turnips. However, the Sector V operatives don't notice that the hole that they created to enter the giant root, it closes up. They don't see this, but it closes up. And besides the pipe pod, we also see that there are a lot of turnips within the giant root. They're just like floating in the middle of the giant root, or they're traveling through it, kind of like water flowing through pipes, essentially. But as the pipe pod goes through the giant root, these turnips start to attach themselves to the pipe pod, and it gets to the point where the Sector V operatives have to escape the pipe pod, because as more turnips cover the pipe pod, it'll eventually fall to the bottom of the giant root and break apart. So the Sector V operatives are able to enter escape pods and what else but escape the pipe pod before it breaks apart from all the turnips attaching themselves to it. So the escape pods do create holes holes to the top of the giant root so that they can exit the giant root, and they're now back outside. And this time, number 4 actually notices the holes closing up, and he tries to tell his teammates about it, but then he sees what has their attention, and he's also in surprise. The source of these turnips is a giant turnip, and yes, it's exceptionally big, a very large turnip, and this turnip seems to have a mind of its own. And we see that there is a farmer that's tending to this turnip. Number 3 seems to be familiar with this farmer, and she keeps referring to the farmer as Grandpa, which confuses number 1 because he points out that the farmer isn't number 3's actual grandpa. But in any case, number 1 thinks that the farmer is using the turnip for an evil plan to force everyone to eat turnips. But it turns out that the farmer actually is just growing a giant turnip for the county fair, and he's hoping to win first place. He seems to be very clueless about the turnips that are invading the treehouse and other households that based off of that giant root. He seems to be unaware of the trouble that the turnip is causing. And even number 5 eventually concludes that, yeah, the farmer isn't the one behind this trouble. The turnip has taken a mind of its own and is causing trouble of its own accord. And yeah, the farmer continues to be oblivious to the turnip as it's capturing the Sector V operatives, or because there are several other routes, and they're like trying to attack the Sector V operatives during this. I guess you can call it a battle. Number 3 ends up contacting Hippie Hop, and she wants to invite Hippie Hop over to where they currently are. Number 4 is dismissive of the idea, but number 1 actually thinks that Hippie Hop could help turn the tide of battle in their favor. So number 1 encourages number 3 to invite Hippie Hop over, but number 1 also stresses to number 3 to tell Hippie Hop that the situation is a Code X79. And number 3 proceeds to mention the code to Hippie Hop, and this causes Hippie Hop to, Hippie Hop we see is heading to the giant turnips location. And we see as Hippie Hop is heading to the turnips location, we also do see scenes of the Sector V operatives continuing to try to avoid the roots of the giant turnip. Number 1 happens to arrive number 1 actually manages to hide underneath the turnip. There's a small root. Yeah, there's a small root at the bottom of the turnip, and it has the turnip. Yeah, the turnip is slightly above the ground because of this small central root. So number 1 manages to hide at the center of the turnip, essentially. And eventually, Hippie Hop does arrive, and number 3 enters Hippie Hop, and Hippie Hop has all of these weapons. All of these weapons emerge from Hippie Hop, and it looks like Hippie Hop is charging a very powerful attack. Unfortunately, though, one of the turnip roots smashes Hippie Hop before Hippie Hop can unleash this powerful attack. And we see number 3 is ejected from Hippie Hop, but her parachute doesn't activate until after she already hits the ground. And number 1 is frustrated by this because he thought that Hippie Hop could help them out. And in his frustration, number 1 kicks the central root of the turnip, and this actually ends up being successful. Kicking the central root causes the turnip to, it causes the turnip to stop its attack on the rest of the Sector V operatives, and the turnip actually falls over and it rolls off the cliff. Or that's right, it's a cliff, and there's a body of water nearby, and the turnip rolls into the body of water. The farmer jumps into the water to chase after the turnip for the county fair. The farmer still seems to be oblivious to the trouble that the turnip was causing. And number 1 thinks that at least they don't have to worry about the turnip causing trouble anymore. But the segment ends with there's a cruise boat, and the passengers of this cruise boat see the giant turnip. And the segment ends with the giant turnip attacking the passengers of the cruise boat. Now, Codename Kids Next Door is a TV series where it kind of does get really weird. Like, it has its really weird moments. So it's very telling if, because of all the weird stuff that goes on in the series, it's very telling if a segment or an episode feels weird even by the standards of the TV series. And that's my impression, both when I originally watched the segment and when I rewatched it again for this recap and thoughts video. That stood out to me. Like, I do feel Operation Turnip is probably one of, if not the weirdest entry from Codename Kids Next Door. And that's not saying it's a bad thing necessarily. It's just, it stood out to me. It's like, it really says a lot if a show that's known for having a lot of weird moments manages to have a segment that makes you feel this is especially weird even by the show's standards. Because, yeah, a giant turnip that's gained sentience and is trying to spread turnips all over, presumably to the rest of the world, starting with where the Sector V operatives are. But yeah, it was a pretty weird segment, but not a bad one. It just really stands out as being like, wow, this really stands out even by the show's standards. And the segment does include other things as well, though. Like, I did mention before with Operation Teeth that season 1 mostly kind of portrayed the kids versus adult conflict in a more black and white, as a more black and white sort of conflict. You don't really see too many shades of gray, at least when compared to the later seasons. But that doesn't mean that those shades of gray aren't present in season 1. They're just not to as great of a degree as they are in the later seasons. And I do think this segment does have an example of those shades of gray before they became more prevalent in later seasons. Because the farmer in this segment, he's not shown to be a bad person, and he's not the villain of the segment. He actually is a pretty benevolent character, and because he really just wanted to win the county fair. He actually was sincere about this. He wasn't trying to, the Turnips' actions wasn't his intention. He just wanted to win the county fair. And he did seem to be honestly oblivious to the trouble that the giant turnip was causing. And like I said, that's kind of like one of those small hints of what's to come later on in the series, where we do see that not all the adults are bad, and that there are some good adults or adults who are benign, as in they're not trying to cause trouble. They're just like, either they actually can be reasonable authority figures, or in the case of the farmer, they're just oblivious to the trouble that's being caused. And, while I'm thinking about the farmer, I do remember back when I first watched this segment, like number 1, I was confused about why number 3 referred to the farmer as her grandpa, even though, as number 1 had clarified for the audience, the farmer isn't actually number 3's grandpa. Although later on, like now I have a better idea of what they might have been referencing with that. Like, I didn't know that originally, but I think I have a better idea of that now later on. And it is mentioned, it's been brought up that in East Asian cultures, kids are encouraged to refer to elders with the title of grandparents, even if they're not their actual grandparents. So that might have been what they were referencing when number 3 was referring to the farmer as her grandpa. That might have been a reference to that cultural detail, I guess you could call it. And number 3's dialogue towards the farmer did seem to suggest that she was familiar with the farmer, so maybe he was a family friend. Because I've seen different sources say, like, kids from those cultures usually refer to any elder with the title or monikers for grandparents, but I've also seen some say that's what they might refer to an elder who's like who they know very well, like a family friend. So, or in any case, yeah, number three's dialogue seemed to suggest that she was familiar with the farmer in some way. So maybe the farmer was a family friend. Who knows? But that was a cool little detail. It showed that it shows how the show's staff did do their research, because number three is Japanese American, or yeah, number three was born in Japan and she came to the United States later. There actually is a segment in season 2 which details number three being from Japan. We'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. But that was a pretty cool. That was a pretty cool detail. Like, it's nice to learn about different cultures. So that was a pretty cool detail. Oh, otherwise, the other thing with this segment was the introduction of Hippie Hop, the giant robot bunny that number three would pilot. And it also did start the this segment. Yeah, this segment started the running gag where Hippie Hop would not be able to do too much, or Hippie Hop would end up being destroyed, and number three being ejected from Hippie Hop, but crashing on the ground before her parachute opens up. That becomes a running gag throughout the series. Having said that, though, there is one episode where Hippie Hop actually does get a chance to save the day. And we'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. I think the running gag still applies in that episode, but Hippie Hop at least does get to save the day before the running gag kicks in. So, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. But, yeah, Hippie Hop does appear. We'll be seeing more of Hippie Hop in the future. And otherwise, yeah, I think that's about it, actually, for this segment. I mean, it is on the weird side, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just really stands out in a show that already has a lot of weirdness going on for it. But it also does feature details that do get carried over in later seasons and later entries, even in season 1, but also later seasons of the series. Like showing us not all adults are bad. And like I said, Hippie Hop goes on to appear in some later entries in the series as well. But yep, I think that's it for now. So as of this video, we've now discussed the A segment of episode 5 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.